Hello, everyone. My name is Laurent Maurice Lafontaine. Welcome to the 14th edition of Massimadi, an Afro LGBTQ plus film and art festival. Massimadi support and distribute Black queer artists and arts that showcase Black queer realities all around the world. And this year, the festival has started on February 11 and will conclude on March 11. We have about 30 films and around 12 countries represent. And tonight we will welcome Stephen Winter, the director of Chocolate Babies, and Nasir Ferebee, the producer of All Boys Are in Blue. And the discussion will be moderated by Paris from Queer Films Concordia. And before everything begin, we will see a clip of each films.
Now, I know you just had the baby, and Gregory said the baby's name's gonna be George.
I was 5 years old when my teeth got kicked out. It was my first trauma.
I always thought it was funny that my grandmother had 3 last names. To me and the other grandkids, she was simply Nanny.
I was depressed at the start of second semester. I was having fun, but deep down inside, I hated myself.
2 others grabbed me by the arms and held me on the ground. I screamed for help as it was all I could do.
I had a home because Nanny insured it. When Nanny wanted something done, it got done.
I gave her the biggest smile I ever had since the day I lost it.
Our chapter was established by a founder of the frat in 1907, making us one of the oldest chapters in Black Greek history.
No amount of money, love, or support can protect you from a society intent on killing you for your blackness.
It was time for me to define me.
Move, Silas, I don't want to hear that. We are going to church this Sunday. Boy, don't you be talking to me like that. And don't be rolling your eyes at me like that. Boy, what is wrong with you? This is Sunday, and every Sunday I have to go through this. I don't want to hear it no more. You hear me? We are going to church, and I don't want to know anything about it. Larry, we are going to church. Now, if you want to come along, you can go upstairs and get yourself a tie and come on. Otherwise, keep your cocksucking ass here.
You call yourself a church lady and talking about cocksuckers.
But that is what they do, isn't it?
You old woman.
Who are you calling old, honey?
You. Who am I standing in front of?
I do not want to hear
Big old sinner, that's
you
what
better
y'all.
just take your
You
back
ain't
downtown if
nothing
you
but a
want
sinner.
to. You
But
know
you
what
can't
I
even
mean?
play
Because
like
I
I'm
don't-
as
you
high
big
a loop.
sissy,
You can call me
better
whatever
get
you want to.
downtown. You
Big
are
Okay, I think we're all back. Can you all hear me well? Is it working?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for joining us today. It's definitely an honor to be speaking with you about these incredible films and their very, very interesting and curious format, which is a little bit easier to kind of start talking so that we can kind of ease our way into the more difficult and complicated themes that we speak about. So maybe let's talk with Stephen a little bit about the format of Chocolate Babies and the interesting way in which the film can come across as a documentary, but whilst it's still a fiction film. So that's an interesting aspect of formatting and just deciding how to do that. So what kind of made you want to go about it that way, or was that intentional, or was that just something that came up with all of the beautiful, colorful characters that we do see and all of the beautiful reactions that are in the film?
Great. That's a great way to start. I think what you're responding to is the beautiful intensity of the performers. And when I made Chocolate Babies, we shot it in 1995 in New York City. So there were a lot of very talented Black actors in the city, of course, but they were mainly in theater and other venues like that because film and TV had such a small limit of jobs. And so we had this incredible community of really experienced performers who were also very much connected to the community. And I cast those people. So when they came together and embodied their characters, they felt like they were playing themselves, although that was indeed not what they were doing. And that's the style I like to run with. So it was never intended to be documentary-esque. It was meant to feel like you are in the drama itself, like as a fly on the wall. And I'm so glad they came across, despite how over the top and stylized it is. So, and that was indeed a way to like bring the realness of these are being HIV positive AIDS activists who are doing fabulous attacks on local politicians to make that make sense. So you would just buy the premise and then roll with it. You know, back then I remember I would tell people the premise, well, it's about HIV positive Black drag queens who are attacking local politicians. And people would say, oh, is that happening? Because it didn't feel like at that time, at least, that it was that big a leap. You know, Act Up did do very wild things sometimes, like put a big condom over Jesse Helm's home or something like that. So it was taking those real life things that were happening and making them fantastical and specifically Black.
It's also interesting that you mentioned that because the experience of watching the film many times, it's that it feels like you're watching characters that you know, especially if you have had one-on-one interaction with the drag queer community. It is representative of characters that is still in this day and age like exist exactly like that, and people like that are still real, and that's how they communicate as well. So to me, it's always felt a very close representation of reality. So that's why I kind of bring that up. So that was very interesting as well. I know, Nasir, that you have also done kind of a take on a format with All Boys Aren't Blue, because essentially what you're doing with that is kind of which are from the memoir that is actually, you know, life experiences but performed by performers. So what was the kind of decision with that, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, so you know, we it was a really fast turnaround with the project. And so, you know, we obviously, you know, there's a few different adaptations of All Boys Aren't Blue. Right now, George Matthew Johnson is working to turning into a television series with Gabrielle Union. And so for us on our side, we wanted to do more of a spoken word piece and more of a dramatic reading. And so we shot it, you know, we put it together over the Christmas break going into 2021. So December of like 2020. And we shot, I think it was January 9th, 2021. We put it together really fast, and we shot it all in one day. And so we wanted to really do the story justice. But at the same time, you know, we didn't take on a whole narrative. You know, we didn't do it in a narrative conceptual way. And so, but the way in which we did the way in which we did take care of, which we did tell the story, excuse me, we definitely felt like we got the message across and really was able to make it compelling and enticing and all of that good stuff. So we're really proud of it.
Yes, it does come across as lyrical, like obviously. So the prose definitely do come through. So from that aspect. I feel like it kind of kept the tone with the format as well. Now, speaking of these new formats and how kind of cinema has been evolving, we wanted to kind of start talking about seeing within queer cinema as well as just Afro queer cinema, because a little bit of a difference in the way that the evolution happens. So I wanted to ask you the question of how you think that, because of the you both have done with cinema and with do you think now that we have access to all the formats and medias and the new ways that we are our art, we are seeing evolution and the way that the art is being shared? Do you become more positive, or do you think that it opened another door that has its own set of, as well as the traditional way of, let's say, publishing or distributing films? You can kind of try and unpack that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think the more content, the better. You know what I mean? I think there's so many mediums out here, and there's so many different avenues for people to get their story told. I think now there's really no excuse, right? Like, if you have an iPhone and you have, a story in your heart, you can execute it and put it up anywhere, whether it be, YouTube or Facebook or wherever the case may be. So I love all of the new platforms. I think it's amazing. I think it gives creatives an outlet to really tell their story their way and their time. And the gatekeepers are slowly but surely being done away with. And so I think it's awesome.
Agreed. I also think that
yeah, go ahead.
I just to say that the thing that filmmakers have to do first is they have to learn their craft and technique. And if you do small format, small projects, to a considerable amount of them, whether they go this place or that place or this place or that place, each time you do a film, you learn more about your art form, learn more about yourself within it. And it can help lead you up to something bigger quicker.
That's really interesting that now that we're talking about a lot of gatekeeping and with that, I just wanted to mention to Nasir, because when the book was being published, that it got back so many different places in America, and that was really crazy as well. So now that you kind of bring up these different mediums, it's also interesting because from one side we have the conservatives trying to kind of ban this book and ban it from anybody ever hearing about it, and children from reading it, because they shouldn't have access to this information. And on the other side, it just blows up on TikTok and everybody's talking about it, because they're like, no, if you ban something, we are going to be talking about it more. So that's, I feel like, how was that, like, what is of kind of going through something like that?
Yeah. Well, watching it happen to George and for George, was very bittersweet. At the end of the day, they got the last laugh. Being that, of course, George's book was banned, or there was a lot of controversy surrounding it, but it's now a New York Times best-selling book. George is now a New York Times best-selling author. So to watch it happen for them has been beautiful and amazing and serendipitous. And I'm beyond proud and happy for George that that they were able to get the last laugh in his way. It's been quite sweet to watch.
I mean, it's been a while since 1996, but I want to talk about how do you feel, Stephen? Do you feel that the cinema as a whole has changed with gatekeeping? Is it become better? Like, do you want to talk about that? I feel like there's some sort of changes that what type of change they are, we can discuss.
Well, sure. Well, back in the 90s, all independent films were funneled through a handful of independent film distributors that were all white. And they were put out in the world through a system of first tier and second tier and third tier film festivals that were also overwhelmingly run by white people. So when you were Black and or queer, those are huge obstacles because there was no other way to get your film out there, much less go from place to place on your own, which I did do. And so, of course, 20-some years later, 25-some years later, everything is completely different. You know, there's streaming services, and there is easier ways for one to make themselves known. So, of course, that is a tremendous change, you know, as it would be after 2 decades, and for the better.
But there's also a shift in the sub as well, because in the 90s and 80s, because of the HIV epidemic, we were talking about that a lot and the threat of it and kind of the dread that everybody within the community was feeling. So now that that conversation has kind of shifted, what kind of changes can we see for Afro-queer filmmakers themselves, like characters that do exist?
Well, I think one great thing is that cinema is no longer centralized as the highest, most popular art form because of the way that technology has shifted the way people view things and the way people consume ideas and personalities. Poetry, modeling, being a personality of sorts. Those are ways to put yourself out there that you don't necessarily need the film to do. And I think when I could rack my brain for particular examples, but when I think about like Brontes, who starts as a poet and performance artist, and now his work is being adapted into a film, it's almost like he doesn't need the film anymore. Like the film is great, but he'll always have been Brontes for the last 10 years because of the way he was able to assert himself in society, which is different. Does that make sense for what the question was?
Yeah, that makes sense. But there is also popularized kind of things within mass media as well. So for instance, we had things like Pose, or we had Moonlight, which was critically acclaimed as well, which kind of bring the Afro-queer community to the forefront. But that is still leaves the question, are we certain where the money is going? Because there is this critical acclaim. So are we seeing more people of color or more queer people being hired to do these projects? Because historically, what we've been proven is that the more popularized or mass media versions of commercially successful films that happen to be queer or happen to be about Black people are made by white men who are usually just cishet. So that's also something that we can kind of think about that as well. Is the money itself going to the people that are within the stories are about them, or is it still the people who are trying to capitalize on this diversity of quota?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, in speaking to that, I think, you know, I think first and foremost, I do want to recognize that we have come a long way, right? Like we've made significant progress. However, we still have a long way to go. And for me, you know, what you're speaking to, it all goes back, in my opinion, to ownership. You know, ownership and capital. You know, who owns the studios, who can greenlight the films, who owns the production companies, who has enough capital to put down, you know, $5 million to make a Moonlight, or $10 million to make a, you know, whatever the project is, or you know, like who can really finance these projects, and are Black people in a position to finance them? You know, we still have a long way to go to get to that point. Are Black queer people in a position to finance them? You know, we still have a long way to get to that point. So the higher up we go, and the more we have that economic power, that economic dollar, the more we can have a say so about what kind of director and what kind of gaffer and what kind of cinematographer and who's going to be the lead and who's going to write the script, so yeah, like I said, we've made progress, but there's still a long way to go to get to the point of ownership and capital where we can fully control our narrative and make sure that it's being written, created, produced, directed, and distributed in the way in which we see fit.
I agree. I also, it's also important to contextualize, that what changes that we've seen in the industry when it comes to allowing Black people, queer or not, to control their narratives is within the last 2, 5, 7 years. It's not a 20-year journey that we've been on. We've been on decades and decades, generation after generation, of Black artists in film having either a glass ceiling or a literal, brick ceiling, keeping them from doing what they wanted to do, to a place where no studio or production company worth their salt would begin a Black queer narrative without having a Black queer lead as one of the primary artists. So that's good. It's also very recent, so I think it's important for us to, as a community, stay the course to hold the industry, and not just the industry, but the people within the world that we intersect with who represent the industry, to hold everyone to account and hold everyone to the promise, the beautiful promise that can be made when trans people get to tell trans stories, when Black people get to tell Black stories, when Black queer folk get to tell Black queer folk stories without question. So, and that's done one-on-one. That's people speaking up in the moment, to say this or that, to help bolster that across the society that makes films. Because that's who makes films. It's people. It's the companies do it, but it's the people within who are answering the phones and typing out the memos and organizing the schedules and making those decisions. Everybody helps towards, it's a communal exercise. Mm-hmm. So we have to continue to hold our community across the board to bear for these principles.
Speaking of these types of communities as well, whenever there is people in power who are not belonging to a certain community and they want to start kind of projects that are more inclusive, that are more diverse, we start to see a little bit of stereotyping and a little bit of attributes that they kind of decide belong to a specific types of people, a specific types of queer people or different minority groups. So how can we kind of navigate the world around that? And do we still think that even now we are beholden to certain characteristics that the companies want us to have as artists? Do we think that it's gotten to the point to have more authentic representation that we fit in with the flamboyant gay character, however stereotypical else put it?
I mean, I think that I think a lot of it starts on the page. You know what I mean? It starts on the page, and then after, if you're going through the studio system, then obviously the producers get involved, and the directors get involved, and then studio execs get involved, and so things can kind of snowball from there as you're sort of accumulating notes. But I think that I think maybe we have to make sure that we are not complicit and make sure that we are doing our just due and being authentic with our own stories. It was the best example that I can think of. It was I was having a conversation with my best friend who is a Black straight cisgendered woman. And it was maybe about 3 years ago, and I said I was watching a show, and I was saying, I'm so sick of Black gay men being treated as accessories. And she said, well, if you're sick of Black gay men being treated as accessories, what are you going to do about it as a Black gay man? And I was like, oh, thank you. So it was a nice wake up call and a nice smack in the face for me to really hold myself accountable and recognize what I could do. And that's not to say that there isn't a whole system and a whole structure that feeds those stereotypical attributes. Of course, there are. But for me, that's such a macro thing to tackle. And for me, I just prefer to focus on the micro goal, which is just like, okay, well, how can I, as a writer, as a producer, as a director, how can I select specific projects or how can I create specific projects and partner with people to make sure that we are all in alignment with telling a full multidimensional story?
I think I know what you were talking about. That was a few years ago, because I remember talking with my best friend a few years ago about all of a sudden in every TV and movie that had a white gay character, their boyfriend or girlfriend was black. Like all of a sudden it happened overnight. Every gay character, male or female, who was white, who had a real part in that show or movie, their boyfriend would show up, they'd be black, they'd have no character. And there was like an easy way that you could slide in some representation, make the white gay character a little more interesting because they're in an interracial relationship. And my friends and I, who were black gay men, were like, we have never seen that many interracial relationships in the general population when we go to a gay bar or some such place. And it is so clearly a play for easy representation because those black lovers never become a real character. And that was a few years ago. And now we've kind of slowly started moving past that because now it's a joke people can make fun of. As a TV trope or as a movie trope. And they can be a little bit better on that. Like there's a big gay movie out right now called 3 Months starring Troye Sivan. And it's pretty good. It's on Paramount Plus. It's a gay movie. And it's about HIV, waiting to get results of an AIDS test. And the boyfriend is of Arab descent. And it's wonderfully drawn character that person has a true backstory. They have their community is also part of the narrative. They're not just showing up in the white guy's world. They have their own thing going on. And that to me is like, well, that's a step forward from 2015. All that to say, what was the original question?
No, we're good. We're just it's kind of like going back to the same.
I can answer the question. You don't have to. So what we can do today, like I remember years ago, one of the black elders told me that he said, we will know we have overcome when there are lousy black directors making lousy black themed films that we don't have to support because they're just able to be out there like average white guys making their movies and doing their thing. We can have it's there. We know it's there. It's fine. We don't have to support it if we don't want to. We as queers do not have to support what we think are silly or outdated queer or gay storylines. We can focus on the things that are good because there's a lot more out there even now than there was in 2019.
Yeah, I love I just saw the caption, "Let us be lousy."
Let us be lousy.
My take on that is that we as people of color or as people that are sort of at the intersection of being marginalized, whether it be black and gay or Latino and gay or whatever, however it is you identify, we don't get the grace to fail up. You know what I mean? Like we do not get the grace to fill up. If we make one bad movie, it's like you are donezo. And it's like, well, wait, can I you don't get a chance to really find your legs. You don't get a chance to really find your voice as a writer, producer, director. It's like, no, you are a goner. You obviously can't do it. Like you got the go, you got the bounce, peace out. But I would love, and that's one of the things on my mission is to give people the grace to fail up and help them figure who they are, figure out who they are as an artist. You know what I mean? And so to second what you just said, it's like that's when we know that we have arrived, that it's sort of like that it's an even playing field, so to speak. It's like, hey, look, you made 3 bad movies, give them another one.
It's a measure of something. It's
Absolutely.
definitely a measure of something. And as an audience member, it's also a measure of something. You used to be able to count all the queer films on one hand at any given time. And now, in terms of queer media, there's a lot that you can dive into,
Mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
leaving other things out if you don't like the way that they're, if you think it's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like for the longest time, Hollywood has been trying to, on the, of course, Hollywood side, the commercial cinema, trying to kind of combat this idea, or the audience, or, queer artists have been combating this idea that black queer films don't sell, or queer films don't sell. Time and time again, we see these big budget with queer characters, with black characters as the lead, and they do well, but then they disappear. So we see like one-offs that are critically acclaimed, like Moonlight. We see like one-offs like Girls Trip. We see these things that pop up and prove all of the box offices and all of the ideas surrounding audiences and what the audience demands wrong. But it feels like we're still kind of combating that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but also, film has fallen apart. Girls Trip did not beget a lot of Black-driven films, but it did beget a lot of Black women on television doing their thing.
Yeah. Run the World, Harlem,
Grand Crew. Things like, it's not, I'm sorry, it's not like, you're going.
Yeah. I don't know if was Insecure pre-Girls Trip or
around the same time.
Yeah. I can't remember, but Insecure. But sorry, I cut you off. Sorry.
No, it's just I think one of the ways to think about this, sitting from February 2022, is that it is important to respect the fact that cinema has moved forward both as an art form and as a commercial venture. It is no longer central. It's important and it's cool and it's beautiful, but it's not central like it was even 5 years, even in the Moonlight year. So people putting themselves out there as loud and proud Black folks, whether queer or not, and you brought up Girls Trip, and that's like, Black women doing their thing. Black women doing their thing, you can see much more of it now than you can pre-pandemic. And that's exciting, and eventually a couple of, like Issa Rae's a movie star. She can do movies as she's moving forward. These things are specific, but the wake that it leaves in its path can be considerable if you open up bigger than film. And I think that's also important to recognize. Girls Trip did not beget a lot of movies, but it did beget a lot of media. And I think it is, I think we could also say that Black queer stories is going to find similar stuff in its wake, like what you're developing with Ms. Union. That's the kind of thing that it will find root eventually, because there's now a demand for it. There's now a lane that's open that says Black stuff, Black women, Black queers, all important. I don't mean like diverse, like how big if anything should be, because it's pretty open. There could be a Black queer blockbuster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There could be. It's the particulars that have to go together to make that happen. But Lil Nas X is around. He could make a movie. There are things that could happen. But it's not so much about we have to change the movie industry. The movie industry is going to just do its thing. We've got to be artists who know ourselves, who are making these authentic stories work in whatever way they end up working. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think we're about to see another thing with Brian Tyree Henry, who's going to play the first I think Black gay superhero. So so again, progress has been made, but still a long way to go. But every great thing takes time. I do want to just quickly clarify something. I'm not working on the series All Boys Aren't Blue. That's just George, just the FYI. But I would like to be. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, and it all intersects when you're moving towards the same goals. You know, having a black gay superhero in a studio film was institutionally inconceivable in 2017. Why? Because Black Panther hadn't come out yet. So up until that point, Black Panther was still pretty much industry inconceivable. And now it's standard. So as much as we have to continue to fight for what it is that we need, it is important to acknowledge these things that did happen because of what we've done. They didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because people like us were fighting for it. And then other people who didn't know they needed it now love it. Everybody loves RuPaul. Right?
Yes, and there is kind of like a difference, I feel, between how we are progressing with cinema and with television. Sometimes it feels like television is moving at a much faster rate, and things that we do see, like tropes or different genres and different characters and representation that we do see in television, takes a while to translate over to film.
Yes.
And it is interesting to think about why that is, and the people that are hiring, or the producers and the money men, essentially, and how different they are in television and in film, because we are now seeing for the first time a lot of more Black producers and Black directors and Black writers. And this is kind of like something that's happening, I feel like, for the first time to this scale. Of course, it's still a crazy number when you think about it, because there is just a huge underrepresentation, but it's way more than we have ever seen before. But I don't feel the same way with Hollywood in cinema, speaking of that. So that's
and remember, movies, it's a totally different business model. The best way to look at it is that TV is fast food, and movies are a bespoke gourmet meal. It takes a lot of more energy and resources to make one fabulous thing than to figure out a way to make 12 of them or 20 of them, you know, at a go. So the math is different, the stakes are different, people are doing it for different reasons, and it's, you know, the runway is long on either way. But one of the reasons that cinema lags behind television is that it takes so long for not just the artists to get their idea together, but for the ducks to go in the row for something like that to happen. I would say not to concern oneself that much with what the industry is doing, and to focus on what you as an artist or as an audience member want to see, and continue to gravitate yourself towards those situations. Again, cinema has completely been upended. It is not the same thing in 2022 as it was in 2012, even when I think what was the 2012 Best Picture? 12 Years a Slave? Maybe that was 12 Years a Slave? Yeah, I think it was around that time, either that or right before it. Back then, the primary place to go get an important story that reflects on human issues, it centers around Black people, was film. 12 Years a Slave, important film. You got to see it in the theater, right? Now, that art, now it would be a prestige Amazon series. They wouldn't do 12 Years a Slave as a movie anymore, because the business model of what the artwork needs to be has changed. So as much as it's important to keep one's eyes on the prize and honor cinema for what it is, and honor film, and honor the experience of going to the theater, which I don't think is going to die, but it will change. It's important to remember the needs that we have as an audience can be fulfilled in other ways. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. I think another factor with TV versus film is that in TV, you can, if you're doing an 8-episode series, if episode 5 sucks, you can recover in episode 6. You know what I mean? Versus in film, like you said, in film, you've been writing and putting, storyboarding, etc. for, years, and it's shot, it's in the can, and then you test it with audiences, then it goes out, then it is kind of is what it is. With TV, again, the word grace again, you can kind of get a little grace to kind of figure things out a little bit more, but still, not a ton, but you get a little more grace, a little more time to kind of like work out the kinks with different things. And so, yeah. And in regards to like, not being concerned about what the industry is doing. I watched this interview with Shonda Rhimes. I mean, it was like 10 or 15 years ago or something like that. And she was talking about how when she came up with the concept of Grey's Anatomy, she was aware that the head of ABC wanted a medical drama, and I'm paraphrasing by the way, and she said, okay, well, how can I give them a medical drama in my way? And so she turned in a character driven, enticing medical drama. And so you have to kind of find, in my opinion, you have to kind of find, you know, your way and your why within the confines of the industry, and kind of figure out how to execute your mission within the bubble of this huge ass system. You know what I mean? And so Shonda was obviously able to do it with Grey's Anatomy 19 seasons later. So that would be my piece of advice for people. It's like, okay, yeah, like, okay, so the head of Netflix wants this. Okay, cool, got it. How can I give them that what they want in my way, and see how it works? And obviously, as the ball gets rolling, you don't know how things are going to pan out. You really, really don't know. This place, this Hollywood business, this whole industry, it's such a faith walk, and it's such a crapshoot. It's such a, and I think beyond that, it's also like it's a test of consistency. Like, how long can you really stay around? How long can you really stick in it? I mean, you shot your movie in what, 90, like you said, 95, 96, and here it is cut to 2022, and the seeds that were planted are now blossoming. And so it's such a triathlon, and so a lot of it is just being consistent and staying in it.
And knowing who you are, knowing what it is that you want to say.
Yeah, and what you won't do.
Yes.
That's super important, to know what you won't do. Oh, please know what you won't do. Trouble, baby. Ooh.
Say that again.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
What kind of changes can we make, like, as for instance, to help the community, or what kind of changes would you like to see the movie goers and cinephiles making moving forward?
I mean, support. You got to go buy the movie. Go to the movie theater if you feel safe. You know what I mean? It's like, go promote it on social media. Tell people about it. I remember, like, when I can't think of a good example right now, but I, like, when I'm trying to think of a good movie, like Do the Right Thing came out, and it was just sort of like, it was just like a passing of the baton of like, hey, did you go see Do the Right Thing? Hey, did you go see it's like having that dialogue and really passing the baton, and lifting as we climb, and making sure other people support your work. Something that I saw from a few of my industry buddies here, when Queen and Slim came out, they bought 50 tickets, and they were like, hey, 50 tickets on me, leave my name at the ArcLight in Hollywood. And it was awesome. So a little bit went a long way.
Yeah, because sometimes, most of the times it feels that as minorities, we have to be making the space for ourselves, because it doesn't necessarily exist within Hollywood and within all these different modes. So it feels like we're constantly trying to make those spaces.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I try not to get caught up on that, even in the context of like us being, when you say minorities, I think of a speech that Prince gave when he said, "Look around, there's nothing minor about you." You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of it kind of also has to do with like, the thinking and the belief system, and some semantics and phrasing and things like that. It's like, I try not to get concerned about making space, because I am the space. You know what I mean? It's like, um, you know, their ice isn't colder to me. I like my ice just fine. You know what I mean? So
Okay, so I think we're gonna open to questions. We have a couple from Facebook. I'm gonna go ahead and ask one for you. Someone has asked, how does working with a literary source affect the filmmaking process?
Yeah, I feel like my director could probably speak better to that, but I'll give it a shot since I'm here. I mean, I think it gave a solid blueprint, right? You know, we weren't coming up with the story from scratch, which was good. You know, it was a really beautiful adaptation, and so we really had it there. It was literally on the page, and so I think it made it easier. You know, I'm in development on a feature now, and you know we're chugging away at the script and you know figuring it out and working out the kinks and establishing the story. And obviously, you know, George had done that already with All Boys Aren't Blue. So I would say, if anything, it gives a solid blueprint of what's already. You know, you can just get picture up and go shoot the thing. You know, so it was super awesome. It was super awesome to have that blueprint.
Also, Laurent had a question for you, Stephen. They were wondering, what do you wish to see in the way we tell stories about AIDS that still exists today?
Oh, that's a great question because so many people assume that it doesn't exist today, and indeed it does. So, what would I like to see? A continual people. Like I remember back in the '90s, AIDS was often used as a plot pivot, you know, to add some unearned gravitas for some reason. This person's HIV positive; they get the test back, HIV, et cetera, and so forth. And back then, you know, it was a dire situation if you were HIV positive. But now people generally only go to that subject matter if they've got something to do, if they have something to say about it, some kind of sensitivity around the subject. So I would continue encouraging layered and human stories that have HIV within them.
Also, there was
I
another
greatly
question from Glenn saying, yeah, go ahead.
I admired great. Oh, it went away. I admired greatly how Stephen was able to capture the activism of the. Yeah, found that while also reading Sarah Schulman's novel Rat Bohemia. What stories about activism places in New York do you think of from that time? Like, what are my favorites? Oh gosh, what a what movies from that time, from the '90s, do I like? I really like, if that's the question, I really like Go Fish by Rose Trochet. I like I like a movie called Poison by Todd Haynes. You know, Harris's bro. Yeah, you know, all the good ones. What's that one from '83 about the black lesbian who has the hack radio? Directed by Lizzie Borden. That one, whatever that is, you can Google it. I'm sorry, Friday night, my brain's a little.
Yeah, no worries. Also, another question for you, Nasir, was how was the communication between the filmmaking creatives and the writer on the project that you were doing?
It was amazing. Yeah, it was really amazing. You know, like I said, you know, it was really on the page, and George was. I think George really gave Nathan free reign of how to adapt, of adapting the film, and really piecing, you know, the beautiful story together that Nathan did, and so it was pretty seamless. You know, we all had an amazing time really working together. It was great, and looking forward to doing it again whenever the time presents itself.
Also, the film was Born in Flames, so we got
Born in
that. And and we had another question. How did you develop a successful producer filmmaker relationship?
I think by, well, again, consistency, but I think this is a good question. Well, with Nathan, it's easy. You know what I mean? Because he's a big brother and a mentor to me. So he's a little different. It's pretty effortless. And I definitely fall into my little brother role, and it's like, hey, what you need, what you want to do? Like, I got this. You know what I mean? So it's pretty effortless. That doesn't, working with him doesn't really take a lot of effort. I know him, he knows me. I know down to his verbiage. I know his lingo on set. I know he forgets his director's book. On set when he leaves for the night. I know grab it. So I know all those different things. I know, when he's meditating and listening to Whitney Houston at the top of the day. So that stuff you just kind of like learn. I would say with other filmmakers, um, you have to work through your ego and work through your self stuff and really be malleable. Really, really be malleable. But I've been fortunate that I've had two directors in particular, Nathan Hill Williams and a gentleman by the name of Kai Streets, that I work with really, really often. And it's just, I don't know, we're all either Pisces or Aquarians. There's just a shorthand. It's just, really the epitome of magic. So, yeah, they're amazing. I could have answered that better. I'm sorry.
No, that was good. Like you said,
Very good.
there's a
Yeah.
vibe, and that's how any kind of good partnership happens. Like it happens naturally, and it's a vibe, and it's productive, and it makes you feel good to work together. If a relationship makes you feel bad, you shouldn't do it anymore. Like finish the gig, but then call it.
Yeah, I now know why, I now know why Scorsese constantly works with Leonardo DiCaprio. I now know why Ryan Coogler is like, oh, get me Michael B. Jordan. I'm like, I didn't get it before. And then working with Kai and Nathan, I was like, oh no, everything them too. If it's not them, I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? It's just when you've had it, so when you have it good like that, you don't want to go back to other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's another question for Steven that says, was there a moment in your filmmaking process where you thought your vision was either bolstered or compromised solely by the condition of the production?
Bolstered, because when you have the only resources you have are your imagination, a meager budget, and really excited crew and cast members, nothing becomes an obstacle anymore. You just figure out what it is you need and make it work within the context of what's going on. I want a car for this scene. I want 3 cars for the scene. You only get one. Well, you figure out a way quickly to make it just as exciting with the one car. That is always the way to do it, because no matter how much money you have for whatever, you still don't have enough to do everything. So you just always use the things you don't have. What's the word for that? It's that Friday night brain happening. You use your whatever lack that you have and turn it into a positive by using your imagination for the resources. I could totally say that better, but I think you know what I'm saying.
We're picking up what you're putting that. It's Friday night.
Yeah, don't think of it as a negative. Like what you were. The reason that you use the same actors that you vibe with is because casting is like 80% of directing. Like once you've cast it correctly, then you're good, because they're in charge of the character. You're in charge of making it great, and y'all work together to make every moment indelible in some way. So if everybody on the crew and everybody in the cast and everybody who's involved in the situation is there for the right reason, you don't really have that many problems. Directors who scream and yell are the ones who haven't planned it out enough, or their egos are in the way.
Or they're nuts.
So there's a question for both of you as well.
Or they're nuts.
So how do you decide which project to launch after such defining pieces that you've had in both of those colorful careers? Both of you can either or.
That I mean, that's a really awesome question. I mean, I'm still figuring it out day by day. In full transparency, um, I've been fortunate. I've had two really strong quality films back to back, that I was the lead producer on, and I want to keep that momentum and keep my projects being strong. And so, maybe to answer eloquently, I would say, not being afraid to say no. That's been a new thing for me. I've been saying no a lot these past few months, and I'm like, oh, this, it's foreign territory for me because I'm used to just like, go, 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 run, 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 get it, get it, get it, and I'm like, actually, no, I don't want to do that, and no, I don't want to do this, and no, I don't want my name on this, or no, I don't want to cast that person, or no, I don't want to work with that person. It's like not being afraid to say no and sticking by it. And sometimes, listen, sometimes you do miss the boat. Sometimes, I said no to something a while ago, and I was like, shit, damn, looks like it's doing well. But it's like, that those things happen, and really trusting your gut and following your instincts. And so, and also like, also practically speaking, I love a good old list of listing out the pros and cons of things and being like, okay, I could do this and I could do that. You know what I mean? It's just really laying it out. So lots of different ways.
I have a diverse portfolio of different projects in different mediums of different genres, and I keep pushing them all forward at the same time and see what pops.
Mm-hmm.
And I make sure that I'm as inspired by all those projects. It's not like I have 8 projects in my B-level projects. I love them all. I want to do them all. But I understand that the different projects need different resources. So I keep them all up in the air. And I only let something bounce or drop when I'm just not into it anymore. Some of the projects that I've done had a gestation period of a year. Some had a decade. But the reason they were still in my mix is because I still cared about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I break down my projects according to, like, I say some are my babies and some are my godchildren. And that's the way that I reference them. And I go, oh, like, oh, that's my goddaughter. I'm trying to take proper care of her, but this is my baby, and this is really my top priority. And so, similar to Steven, I try to keep it at like 6, so that way I'm not going too crazy.
That's quite a few.
Yeah, I try to keep it at like I only got 6 right now because it's difficult. It's not easy. So.
There's a COVID-related question there for Stephen. Did cultural production around COVID and epidemic affect how you think about your story from another epidemic?
Oh, wow. Oh, because of chocolate babies. Oh, I see.
That's a good question.
Wow. Well, during the second year of the pandemic, my films were picked up for the Criterion Channel, and they played there. And I believe one of the reasons why they were so excited to get them at this juncture is because not only because of Black Lives Matter, but also because that it was an epidemic themed film, that the relevancy was even more stark and dramatic speaking towards today. And the other cool thing about Chocolate Babies is that because the characters are so flamboyant and they wear costumes as their regular clothes, the film has a timeless fashion to it. It doesn't feel like 1995. It feels like it could be any time in New York because the clothes don't scream 1995. And neither do the subject matter, because when you are oppressed, when you are desperate, at a certain point, anything goes, So the activism that the characters are embodying they're specific to HIV and Blackness as it related to the mid-90s, but they're also a universal complaint that my humanity matters as well. So I think that's great.
Okay, I think that's all the time that we have for questions. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been an incredible opportunity to brain and talk about your incredible films you're doing. So thank you for imparting your and your knowledge. We appreciate it greatly.
Yes, thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
That's a real treat, a real joy. It's great to see you. I'm glad that your yellow shirt and my blue shirt blended so well in the video.
It's the blue wall for me. Like that blue wall is just epic.
Thank you. It's I change it every few years. It used to be orange.
It is gorgeous. I love it.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
As is the resolution on your camera for your lovely face.
Thank you. I'm gonna take the word for that one. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we are going to cut with